Yes, before we start, let's just wait. Okay, so let's just revise or revisit the chapter that is Stone Phase Part 1. Anyone who knows the summary and wants to tell Part 1 for Part 1? No one? Summary of Part 1, the Great Stone Phase Part 1. Nobody knows. We have read the chapter, discussed the question answers. Still, I am not able to see any hand. Why so? Hurry up. Great Stone Phase Part 1. Just tell me the summary. What have you read? That's all. Short summary. Or else I have to choose the students myself again. Okay, let's start with Astha. Astha, you start. Hurry up, Astha. Unmute and start speaking. What's there in the Great Stone Phase Part 1? What is this story about? Hurry up, Astha. Yes. Unmute करने के बाद Astha, you have to speak. Astha, you are not audible. Wait a second. Check. No, Astha, I'm not able to hear you, but yes, I can see the mic that you are speaking, but we are not able to hear. Okay, just wait. Check your connection. Yes, Bani, you start.
Okay. One afternoon, Ernest and her mother were talking about the great stone face. Her mother told that when she was small, her mother told her that one day a noble man will come that has the exact face of the great stone that of the mountain. And one day a rumor was spread in the village that a man with the exact face named Gathergold has came to the village, but Ernest went to see the man, uh, but he knew that all people were saying that it because of his money. But one day the Gathergold died because he was lonely. Then after that, another man came in the village that was a soldier. He was also known as the rock as the name of Rock and Thunder, but he was also not looking like the great stone face.
Okay. So the first, there was, we came to know about the prophecy in first part, and the prophecy was that somewhere a child would be born, and then the child would resemble the great stone face. Okay. So Ernest, he heard the story when he was a child, and after he grew up, he still believed in that prophecy. He wanted to meet that man who resembled the great stone face. So he was waiting for that man, and in first part only we have read that we came across two, you can say two men, in which first he was Gathergold, okay, and he was a businessman. When he came, people thought he resembled the Great Stone Face, but just because of his wealth, nothing else. And Ernest was not convinced that he resembled the Great Stone Face. After that, when he died, he was alone. The man, when he died, he was all alone. So the people, they also agreed that he didn't resemble Great Stone Face. After some time, the next man came. He was a soldier earlier, and then he raised to a position, and he was given a name Blood and Thunder because of his bravery and his techniques, you can say. But when Ernest saw him, still Ernest was not convinced that he resembled Great Stone Face. So now we are going to read. So it means in first part we have read, there Ernest was not able to see or able to meet the person who resembled Great Stone Face. Let's see what happened to the with that prophecy, whether it came true or not. So many years passed. Ernest was now a man of middle age. Okay, now he was a man of middle age. Okay, then to his neighbors who never suspected that he was anything more than an ordinary and familiar face, he was only a humble. These are again the qualities of Ernest: humble, hardworking, though thoughtful person. He was humble, he was hardworking, and then a thoughtful person. But what about the prophecy? Was it ever fulfilled? Let us read and find out. Yes. So, who will read? Who wants to read? Only Bani? Okay, Bani and then Jevan. Chalo Bani and then Jevan.
The years hurried on and brought white hairs upon the head of Ernest, and made wrinkles across his forehead and furious in his cheeks. He was an old man, but not in vain had he grown old. More numerous than the white hairs on his head were the wise thoughts in his mind, and Ernest had ceased to be obscure, unsought for, undesired, had come the fame with so many seats. He had become famous beyond the limits of the valley. College professors and even the active men of cities came from far to see and
Converse.
converse with Ernest, and he received them with gentle sincerity and spoke freely with them of whatever came uppermost or lay deepest in his heart or their own. While they talked together, his face would brighten unawares and shine upon them as with a mild evening light. While Ernest had been growing old, God had
So now the years hurried on and brought means now he was a man of middle age. And then this is the description of his face, where what he looked when he was in his middle age: wrinkles, white hair, and then deep lines in his cheeks. So he was an old man, but not in vain had he grown old. So it means it was, you cannot say that it was just useless, it was not fruitful that he had grown old. What happened with the passage of time, that more numerous than the white hairs on his head were the wise thoughts in his mind. Means he was very wise. Okay, he was very wise. There were very good thoughts, very wise thoughts in his mind. And then Ernest has ceased to be obscure. Ceased means end. Ceased means end. To be obscure, not well known. Means now Ernest became famous. Is it okay? Without doing anything, just because of his, you can say, wise thoughts, his good nature, he became famous. He didn't want that fame, but he became one. So he became very famous. Unsought means that not search for, not the thing that you are not looking for. Okay. Unsought for, undesired had come the fame which so many see. Yes. So Ernest became famous and he didn't even want that fame. उसे वो fame चाहिए नहीं था, but still he got that fame. So he had become famous beyond the limits of the valley. It's not that he was famous in his valley only. He was famous outside the valley also because of his wise thoughts. College professors and even the active men of cities came from far to see and converse with Ernest, and he received them with gentle sincerity and spoke freely. Right? He welcomed them, and then he used to speak, and then whatever they wanted to talk, whatever he wanted to talk, they used to have a conversation. Okay, the people who used to come there. So while they talked together, his face would be very bright, and without knowing anything, it looked like that his face was shining. Okay, that was the, you can say, he was so famous, but still very simple. Okay, and whenever he conversed, whenever he talked with to someone, there was kind of brightness on his face. Yes, Jevant.
Yes, ma'am. While Ernest had been growing old, God has granted a new poet to this earth. He too was a native of the valley, but had spent the greater part of his life in distant cities, pouring out his sweet music everywhere. Neither was the great stone face forgotten, for the poet had celebrated it in a poem. The songs of this poet found their way to Ernest. He read them after his customary toil, seated on the bench before his cottage door. As he read, he lifted his eyes to the mountain. Oh, great stone face!
So Ernest had been growing old, so God granted there was again a man on that earth. He was a poet and he was a native of the valley. He was born there in that valley. Okay. So, but he hadn't spent his, you can say, life, that young age, you can say, or youth, whatever. So he was somewhere, he lived somewhere else, and then he wrote different poems. Now the thing is, neither was the great stone face forgotten. Means the poet, that poet, he had written poems about that great stone face. Okay, it means he knew about the great stone face. He was born in the valley and he knew about that great stone face, and he had celebrated the great stone face. He had written about that great stone face in his poem. So the songs of this poet found their way to Ernest. Means now Ernest also came to know about the poet and he also read his poetry. So he read them after his customary toil, means it's after his usual work, whatever his regular work was. After doing that, Ernest used to read the poetry of that poet. And as he read, he lifted his eyes to the mountain. And when he used to read, he used to see that mountain also. "O great stone face," he said, "is not this man worthy to be your likeness?" Means he used to ask patience that maybe he had a hope that maybe this man would resemble the face of the great stone face. Okay. Hardik, there was no wall. It was a mountain. It was a mountain. Yes. Who's next? Who will read? Anvay, this is said by Ernest. Whenever he used to read the poetry, जब वो बैठ के उसे poet के बारे में पता चला, when he got to know about the poet, He started reading his poem, and after reading the poems, he started thinking maybe this person, this poet, maybe resembles resemble that great stone face. The mountain has which person? Have they? They are still waiting for that person to come. अभी तक कोई इंसान आया नहीं है जो उस फेस को रिजेंबल करता है. They are waiting for that man to come, okay, and the prophecy to come true. Yes, Prabal. Unmute.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, said the poet. Can you give a traveler a night shelter? Gladly answered.
Skipped the whole paragraph. The face seemed to smile.
The face seemed to smile but did not answer. Now it happened that the poet who he lived so far away had not only heard of Ernest but had thought much about his character and wished to meet this man whose wisdom walked in hand with the noble simplicity of his life. One summer day, therefore, he arrived at Ernest's door, where he found the good old man holding a book in his hand, which he read, and then, with a finger between the leaves, looked lovingly at the great stone face. Good evening, said the poet. Can you give a traveler a night shelter? Gladly answered Ernest, and then he added, smiling, I think I never saw the great stone face look so hospitably at a stranger.
Wait. Now, the face seemed to smile when that man Ernest asked this question. That is not this man worthy to be your likeness? To this question, it looked like that the face, the great stone face, smiled, but it did not answer. The face didn't give any answer to Ernest. Now what happened? That poet, thus, as Ernest knew about the poet, same way the poet also had heard about Ernest's wisdom and his simplicity. Okay, so the poet also wanted to meet Ernest because he wanted to see. He had heard much about his character. Okay, but had thought much about his character and wished to meet this man whose wisdom walked hand in hand, means he was wise as well as simple, right? He lived his life in simplicity. Okay, he was wise and nothing to be proud of. He wasn't full of ego and all. He was very simple man, very noble and very wise. Okay, so the poet also wanted to meet Ernest. As Ernest, after reading the poetry, he also wanted to meet the poet. Now the poet, as he had also heard about that Ernest, he wanted to meet that man. Okay, now one summer day, what happened? Ernest was just sitting, he was reading that book. The book was in his hand, the poet's book was in his hand, he was reading that, and then he was looking at the great stone face, the usual thing that he used to do. That time, one evening, a man came. Okay, that was the poet. So he greeted and he asked Ernest if he could give him some space, some place to spend the night. Okay, and Ernest, as he was very humble, he was very kind, so he agreed. He said yes. And then he looked at the great stone face. Ernest looked at the great stone face and he realized that the great stone face was looking very kind and very gentle. The face was looking at the stranger with all kind of, you can say, gentle and kind expressions. Is it okay? So Ernest said to that man, the poet, that the great stone face had never looked at anyone with such kindness and gentle expressions. Okay, now, yes, Punya.
The poet sat down beside him and he and Ernest talked together. Never before had the poet talked with a man like Ernest, so wise and gentle and kind. Ernest, on the other hand, was moved by the living images flung out of the poet's mind. As Ernest listened to the poet, he imagined that the great stone face was bending forward to listen to. He gazed into the poet's eyes. Who are you, my gifted guest? He asked. The
Now what happened? The poet sat down and they talked. Ernest and the poet, they were talking, and the poet had never talked to a wise man like Ernest. Ernest was very wise, he was gentle, he was kind, and on the other hand, Ernest was also impressed with the way the poet created images. Okay, the poet had very creative mind. Okay, so the Ernest was also impressed, and the poet definitely he was impressed. So after as Ernest was listening to the poet, he already had seen, Ernest had seen that the mountain was taking special interest in that stranger. So that time when he looked at the great stone face, it looked like that the great stone face was trying to listen to their conversation. Great stone face जो है वो भी bend होके उनकी बातें सुनने की कोशिश कर रहा है and was trying to was looking into the poet's eyes. Okay, so means the great stone face was showing some special interest in the poet. Okay, so after noticing everything, Ernest asked, who are you, my gifted guest? He asked about the identity of the poet. Yes, Bani.
The poet laid his fingers on the book that Ernest had been reading. You have read this poem, said he. You know me, therefore I wrote them. Again and again, Ernest examined the poet's features. He turned towards the great stone face, then back. He shook his head and sighed. Why are you so sad? Inquired the poet. Because, replied Ernest, although life I have awaited the fulfillment of a prosperity, and when I read this poem, I hope that it might be fulfilled in you. You hope, answered the poet, faintly smiling to find in me the likeness of the great stone face. I am not worthy to be its likeness.
Wait. Now what
And
happened? Wait. The poet, when Ernest asked him who was he? So the poet, he just laid his finger, he pointed towards that book and said that if you are reading this book, it means you know me. As the poems are written, I have written the poems. So then what happened that Ernest, he started examining, he was looking at the poet and then at the great stone face, and after some time, he just shook his hand and showed his disappointment. Okay, he was disappointment. So the poet, he asked him, why are you sad, what happened? So Ernest said that all through this time, that when he said that he was just waiting for the prophecy to come true, and when he read his poems, he had a hope that now the prophecy might come true, might happen, or might be fulfilled, right? So the poet, he just smiled and said that you actually hoped after reading my poem, and he said that it is not, I'm not worthy of this. Even you cannot just think that I would resemble the great stone face. Okay, उसने कहा कि मैं इतना worthy नहीं हूँ. I don't deserve this. कि आप ये सोचो मेरी पोएम को पढ़ के that मैं कुछ resemble भी करता हूँ होगा that great stone face के साथ. Is it okay? So he said that I'm not worthy of it. Yes, Bani, continue.
And why not? Asked Ernest. He pointed to the book. Are not those thoughts worthy? You can hear in them the distant voice of a heavenly song. But my life, dearest Ernest, have not corresponded with my thoughts. I have had grand dreams, but they have been only dreams. Sometimes I lacked faith in my own thoughts. Why then, for seeker of the good and true, should you hope to find me in the face of the mountain? The poet spoke.
Now, Ernest asked, why not? Why aren't you worthy? Then he said that, haven't you written these poems? Aren't these your thoughts? And then he said that the thoughts were very great. The poem was great. So he asked that this poem deserved this thing, that comparison. So the poet said that you can hear in them the distant voice of a heavenly song. Means everything, whatever I have written in this poem is some kind of heaven, right? A kind of heaven song. But he said that my life is totally different. It is not same as of my poetry. Not does you can say it didn't match. Okay, no comparison. Life is totally different and poetry is totally different. And he said that I have had grand dreams, but they have been only dreams. Means he wasn't able to fulfill his dreams. He said that I had dreams, but they still are dreams. And then sometimes I lack faith in my own thoughts. He said that I still don't, sometimes I don't even believe myself. मुझे अपने ऊपर भी डाउट होता है, मुझे अपने थॉट्स के ऊपर भी डाउट होता है. I am not that great. Why then, pure seeker of the good and true, should you hope to find me in the face of the mountain? He said that you, and maybe some kind of dreams. We all have dreams. So he had not mentioned what kind of dreams, but yes, he had dreams, but he was not able to fulfill the dreams. Okay, and he sometimes was not, you can say, self-confident. So he said that he wasn't that good and true. And he said that Ernest was trying to find out someone very good, very noble, wise and true. And then he said that how can you compare or how can you try to find out any similarities between the face and me? The poet said this. Poet said that my life is totally opposite to whatever I wrote. मैं जो भी लिखता हूँ मेरी लाइफ उससे ऑपोजिट है. पोएम में जो भी मैंने लिखा है दैट इज ऑल पॉजिटिव एंड एवरीथिंग इज गुड, राइट? बट व्हाटएवर इज एक्चुअली हैपनिंग दैट इज टोटली डिफरेंट. Got it? We will continue tomorrow. If you have any doubt, please ask.